Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really getting into something critical. The hidden cognitive roadblocks that can just quietly sabotage strategic decision-making. We're talking about the difference between making a tough call with, incomplete information and making a flat-out bad decision because of, well, sheer mental laziness.
Right.
Our source material for this deep dive argues that an organization's integrity really starts to break down when its leaders base their authority on, unverified guesses and these rigid beliefs they just refuse to update.
And that's where this core concept of the dual threat comes in. Look, leadership is calculated risk. That's part of the job.
Sure.
But we have to distinguish that from what the sources call cognitive negligence. It's not the same thing at all.
Okay, so what are the two sides of that threat?
Well, decisions tend to fail for one of two main reasons. The first is what's called the assumption gap. This is when you don't have the data. And your brain, it hits a vacuum, so you fill
You fill it with the easiest guess.
the easiest, most convenient guess. And when that happens, people climb what's known as the ladder of inference way, way too quickly.
Okay, that concept, the ladder of inference, it gets thrown around a lot. For anyone who hasn't heard of it, what does that actually look like? What is that climb?
Think of it like a mental shortcut. You start with raw data at the bottom,
Right.
but you immediately select only some of it, you interpret it through your own lens, and then boom, you jump straight to a belief, an assumption that now feels like a fact.
And the danger is that you're so far up the ladder.
You're so far removed from the actual data you started with, and it becomes incredibly hard to climb back down and recheck your steps.
So you're filling a blank with a convenient story. But the second threat you mentioned sounds, frankly, a lot more stubborn.
Oh, it is. It's way more insidious. That's the preconceived barrier.
Yeah.
Here, it's not that you lack data. You actually have it.
You're just ignoring it.
You are actively rejecting valid, pragmatic evidence because it doesn't fit a belief you already hold. And that belief could be tied to anything. Your ego, your professional history, the company's origin story. It's a filter.
So the mission here really is to get from a place of guessing or dogma to a place of verification. What's the skill we need for that?
The essential skill is, well, a proper education in metacognition. And that's not just knowing things. It's the ability to pause and analyze your own thinking.
Sort of hitting the rewind button on your own logic.
Exactly. To ask yourself, wait a second, how did I get to this conclusion? Did I cherry pick the data that confirmed what I wanted to believe, or did I really look at everything?
I like that. It's like running a diagnostic on your brain's operating system. Okay, let's unpack this. If assumptions are, blind, the sources say preconceived notions are dangerous because they're just stubborn.
They create a closed loop.
A closed loop that just ignores reality. So let's look at how that stubbornness really infects an organization.
The source material breaks this down into three specific dangers. The first is the interpersonal aspect. And this shows up as basically institutional stereotyping.
And it creates something called a competence filter. That sounds pretty brutal.
It is, because the preconceived notion isn't about the idea being presented. It's about the person presenting it. A senior leader has this rigid belief that, say, a new hire is too junior to get the big picture, or that someone from the tech department lacks the business context.
So a perfectly valid data-backed solution gets shot down just because of who said it. The messenger gets rejected, not the message.
Precisely.
I've seen that happen in meetings. A great idea comes from someone junior in the back of the room and it's crickets. Then 10 minutes later, a department head says the exact same thing and everyone loves it.
That is the competence filter in action. And the result is what the research calls talent paralysis. You have the right people with the right data, but this preconceived notion of who's allowed to be right just paralyzes them.
You end up paying for talent you refuse to use. It's crazy.
It is.
So, okay, that's what happens when we dismiss junior staff. But what about when the most senior, the most educated people are actually the problem?
Well, that takes us right to the second danger, the intellectual aspect. This is super common among, experts, engineers, people with long tenure. They can fall right into the Dunning-Kruger effect, or the curse of knowledge.
What's the mechanism there?
The expert is relying on knowledge they learned maybe a decade ago, and they start to confuse that deep familiarity with current fact. They just stop checking.
Because they assume what they knew back then is still true today.
Yes. They think their old expertise is the same as new evidence. And so when someone comes along with a new data-driven idea that challenges that old knowledge,
They don't see it as an opportunity, they see it as a threat.
a direct threat to their status, defending that old preconceived notion becomes a way to defend their own career, their own ego. They end up blocking progress just to avoid admitting their own mental map is out of date.
Which leads us to the third danger, the contextual aspect. This is the big organizational one, right? Legacy thinking.
This is the classic, we've always done it this way, so it must be the right way.
Right.
It's confusing a comfortable habit with a proven best practice. The organization feels this sense of historical safety, and it optimizes everything for the past. Its tech, its culture, its hiring. Think of Blockbuster or Kodak.
They were perfectly designed for a world that was disappearing.
Exactly. They were drowning in data that showed streaming or digital was the future. But the weight of their own legacy, that preconceived notion that they were a retail company or a film company, made them completely blind to the threat right in front of them.
So before we get into the actual structural solutions, the fixes, the source material points to something else, a cultural prerequisite.
Yes.
You can have the best systems in the world, but if the culture rejects them, they're useless.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. You cannot challenge a leader's assumptions if doing so gets you punished. Evidence-based management requires a foundation of psychological safety.
We hear that term a lot. What does it really mean in this context for breaking down these barriers?
It means creating a culture where dissent is seen as an act of loyalty, not insubordination.
The person isn't the idea.
The person is not the idea. That's the core rule.
Yeah.
That has to be okay to be wrong, to throw out an idea that doesn't work. But it has to be unacceptable to ignore data just to stay right and protect an ego.
I mean, this is so critical. Imagine you're a junior person on a big project, and you see a flaw. You see the data point that proves the whole thing is based on a false assumption.
If the last time you spoke up you got sidelined, what are you going to do?
You're going to stay quiet.
You're going to stay quiet to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And the organization's fate becomes less important than your own job security. You'll let the entire organization march off a cliff, not because you didn't see it coming, but because you were afraid to say something.
That's the ultimate failure, isn't it? The data was there, but the culture actively suppressed it out of fear. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting and really strategic. The source material provides a solution, the Triadic Validation Framework. This sounds like a high-security system for decisions.
That's a good way to think about it. It's 3 distinct filters, each designed to catch a different kind of cognitive failure.
So what's the first one?
The first is the Epistemological Check. It's a big word, but it just targets simple, unsupported assumptions.
In practical terms, what's the rule here?
The rule is wonderfully blunt. In God we trust, all others must bring data.
Huh. I like that.
It means any proposal based on a gut feeling or intuition or just, I've been doing this for 20 years, it fails the check.
So a marketing campaign that just feels right is dead on arrival.
Instantly. And it goes deeper. The data you do bring has to distinguish between vanity metrics and actionable metrics.
Clicks versus conversions.
Exactly. Are you showing us website traffic that looks good, or are you showing us how that traffic actually changed customer behavior? Intuition is out. Evidence is in.
Okay, so that handles the blind assumptions. The second filter is the empirical check. This one targets, what, the ivory tower syndrome? Over-optimism.
Right. We all have an optimism bias. We think our plans are going to work. The tool to fight this is the pre-mortem analysis.
Not a post-mortem, a pre-mortem.
Right. A post-mortem is an autopsy. It's after the failure. A pre-mortem is a simulation. You do it before you even start.
So walk me through how that meeting would actually run. How do you flip that switch from optimism to realism?
You get the whole team in a room and you give them a very specific script. You say, okay, everyone, imagine it's 1 year from today. This project, this amazing plan we all love, has failed. It has failed spectacularly.
Oh, wow.
Now, for the next hour, your job is to write down every single reason why it failed. Be specific.
That is powerful. It completely shifts your mindset. You're not brainstorming ways to win anymore.
No, you are forced into pragmatic mode. You have permission to criticize everything, the tech, the market assumptions, the internal politics. You're stress testing the plan against reality before you commit a single dollar.
It's like an enforced reality check. I love that. Okay, so that leaves the third filter, the cognitive check. And this one targets the really tough stuff, the preconceived notions, the groupthink.
Exactly. And the tool here is the designated dissenter, which is sometimes called the 10th man rule. The whole point is to institutionalize dissent.
How does that work?
If a planning group agrees unanimously on a really critical assumption, like our main competitor won't react for at least 6 months, one person is formally assigned a role.
A dissenter.
The dissenter. And their job is to aggressively attack that assumption. They must find contrary evidence, even if they personally agree with the group.
So it's not personal, it's a structural role.
That's the key. It attacks the idea without attacking the leader. The dissenter isn't being a troublemaker. They're doing their job. It gives the team an intellectual shield to go after a bad assumption without anyone fearing reprisal.
So if we tie this all together, this entire framework, it's about shifting a culture.
It's a complete shift. It moves an organization from a culture based on assumptions and ego to one based on evidence and verification.
The source material actually sums up the commitment that leadership has to make. I think this works as a great personal standard for anyone listening, really. They call it the evidence-based pledge.
It's powerful. It basically asks a leader to internalize a few core principles. I will not confuse my experience with evidence. I will not confuse my title with truth. And I will not confuse a familiar habit with a best practice.
And the last one is the big one, the one that ties it all together. When my preconceived notions are challenged by pragmatic data, I will not defend my ego. I will update my map.
That's it. That's the whole game.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, what does this all mean? I guess the ultimate measure of organizational maturity is making that shift from assuming to knowing.
Right. Assumption is just gambling.
Yeah.
And clinging to a preconceived notion, that's just arrogance.
And neither one is sustainable when reality is constantly changing around you.
It's about building systems that make it hard to be lazy in your thinking and easy to be corrected.
So we know the goal is to anchor ourselves in that pragmatic, empirical reality. But here's the thought for you to take away. How often in your own day-to-day life, at work, at home, do you catch yourself treating familiarity as if it were fact? And what kind of system, maybe like a personal pre-mortem on a big goal, could you adopt right now to force yourself into that pragmatic mode and check your own assumptions before they become your failures? Think about that until our next deep dive.